The marble floors of the Billionaire mansion gleamed like mirrors under the crystal chandeliers. But Sheikh Tariq al-Mansouri barely noticed the opulence surrounding him as he stood in the grand foyer, mud from the morning's polo match still clinging to his custom Italian riding boots. The humiliation of losing to his business rival in front of Los Angeles's elite had left him seething, his pride wounded and his temper looking for a target. When he spotted the young Latina woman kneeling beside the ornate fountain, carefully tending to the imported orchids that his interior designer had insisted would impress visiting dignitaries, something dark and cruel stirred in his chest. "You!" he called out, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling with the particular authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. "Come here." Isabella Morales looked up from the delicate white blooms she had been nurturing, her hands still damp from the fountain's spray. At 19, she possessed the quiet dignity of someone who had learned early that survival often required swallowing pride, but her dark eyes held a spark that suggested her spirit remained unbroken despite the circumstances that had brought her to work in the mansions of Beverly Hills. "Yes, sir," she said, rising gracefully and wiping her hands on the simple apron that covered her uniform. Tariq studied her for a moment, taking in the careful way she held herself, the respectful but not servile tone of her voice, the intelligence that flickered behind her polite expression. In another mood, he might have recognized these qualities as admirable. Today, they only fueled his desire to assert dominance over someone who couldn't fight back. "Clean my shoes," he said, extending one mud-caked boot toward her. "Do a good job, and I'll pay you $10,000. The offer hung in the air between them like a challenge, its very excess designed to humiliate rather than reward. $10,000 for a task that should cost 20. The amount was simultaneously generous and insulting, a demonstration of how little such money meant to him and how desperately he assumed she needed it. Isabella looked down at the expensive boots, then back up at his face, reading the cruelty behind the offer with the particular wisdom of someone who had learned to navigate the treacherous waters of working for the wealthy. She had cleaned houses since she was 14, helping her mother support 3 younger siblings after her father's construction accident had left him unable to work. She had scrubbed toilets for tech executives, organized closets for Hollywood wives, and endured countless small humiliations from people who saw her as invisible until they needed something cleaned. But this was different. This wasn't about cleanliness or even money. This was about power, about a man who wanted to watch her kneel before him, to reduce her to a symbol of his superiority. The $10,000 wasn't payment. It was the price of her dignity, offered by someone who believed everything and everyone had a price. "No, thank you," Isabella said quietly, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was refusing. "I don't clean shoes." The words fell into the silence like stones into still water, creating ripples that spread outward through the cavernous space. Tariq stared at her, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. In his world, $10,000 was a trivial sum, but to someone in her position, it should have been life-changing. The refusal made no logical sense, which made it all the more infuriating. "Excuse me," he said, his voice dropping to the dangerous quiet that his business associates had learned to fear. "I said no, thank you," Isabella repeated, meeting his gaze with calm resolve. "I'm here to care for your plants and maintain your gardens. I don't clean shoes, regardless of the payment offered." The standoff stretched between them, 2 people from vastly different worlds suddenly locked in a battle of wills that neither had anticipated. Around them, the mansion continued its silent testimony to wealth and power. Persian rugs that cost more than most people's annual salaries, artwork that belonged in museums, furniture crafted by master artisans who had been dead for centuries. But in this moment, all of that faded into background noise as something more fundamental played out in the space between a billionaire and a gardener. "Do you understand who I am?" Tariq asked, his voice rising with each word. "And do you have any idea what $10,000 could mean to someone like you?" Isabella's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only sign that his words had found their mark. "I understand exactly who you are, Mr. Al-Mansouri, and I understand exactly what $10,000 means. But I also understand what I am and what I'm not willing to do for any amount of money." The response hit Tariq like a physical blow, not because of its defiance, but because of its dignity. This young woman, who couldn't have been much older than his own daughter studying at Stanford, had just demonstrated a strength of character that he wasn't sure he possessed himself. She had looked at more money than she probably saw in a year and chosen self-respect instead. "You're fired," he said, the words coming out harsher than he had intended. Isabella nodded once, untying her apron with steady hands. "I understand. I'll collect my things and leave." As she walked toward the service entrance, her back straight and her pace unhurried, Tariq felt something cold and uncomfortable settling in his stomach. He had expected tears, pleading, perhaps anger. He had not expected this quiet grace, this refusal to be diminished by his cruelty. Watching her leave, he realized that she had just taught him something about power that all his wealth and success had failed to reveal. That true strength came not from the ability to humiliate others, but from the refusal to be humiliated. 3 hours later, Tariq sat in his home office, overlooking the perfectly manicured grounds that Isabella and her team maintained, staring at a background check his security firm had compiled on all household staff. Isabella Morales, 19 years old, high school valedictorian, full scholarship to UCLA that she had deferred to help support her family after her father's accident. She worked 3 jobs: the gardening service, weekend shifts at a local diner, and tutoring neighborhood children in mathematics. Her goal was to save enough money to start college while still helping her family, a plan that would take her at least 3 more years at her current rate. The report painted a picture of someone whose life had been shaped by responsibility and sacrifice, who had earned every opportunity through merit and determination. She wasn't just a gardener. She was a young woman with dreams and plans, and the intelligence to achieve them if circumstances allowed. The $10,000 he had offered as a tool of humiliation would have changed her life in ways he hadn't bothered to consider. His phone buzzed with a text from his daughter Layla at Stanford. "Dad, remember what you taught me about treating people with respect, regardless of their position. I'm using that lesson in my ethics class presentation tomorrow. Thanks for being such a good example." The message felt like a knife twisting in his chest. What kind of example had he just set? What would Layla think if she knew how he had treated someone her own age? Someone who was working multiple jobs to achieve the same educational opportunities that Layla took for granted. That evening, Tariq found himself driving through East Los Angeles, following the address from Isabella's employment file. The neighborhood was a world away from Bel Air, small houses with chain-link fences, cars that had seen better decades, corner stores with signs in Spanish and English. But there was life here in a way that his sterile mansion often lacked. Children playing in the streets, families gathered on front porches, the sounds of music and conversation drifting from open windows. Isabella's house was a modest single-story structure with a small front yard where someone had coaxed an impressive garden from what must have been challenging soil. Tomatoes climbed wooden stakes, peppers grew in neat rows, and flowers added splashes of color that spoke to the same care and attention he had seen her bring to his orchids. He sat in his car for 20 minutes, struggling with what to say, how to explain his presence without making things worse. Finally, he walked to the front door and knocked, his expensive suit feeling absurdly out of place in this neighborhood where authenticity mattered more than labels. Isabella answered the door, her surprise quickly masked by wariness. Behind her, he could hear the sounds of family life, children's voices, the clatter of dishes, someone practicing piano with more enthusiasm than skill. "Ah, Mr. Al-Mansouri, what are you doing here?" "I came to apologize," he said, the words feeling strange in his mouth, "and to ask if you would consider returning to work." Isabella studied his face, looking for signs of sincerity or manipulation. Why? The simple question forced him to confront motivations he wasn't sure he understood himself. Because I was wrong. Because you showed more character in 5 minutes than I've shown in years. Because I need to learn how to be the kind of person my daughter thinks I am. And the shoe cleaning was a test I failed, not one you did. Isabella was quiet for a long moment, her hand resting on the doorframe as she weighed his words against her experience of his behavior. Mr. Al-Mansouri, I appreciate the apology, but I don't think I can work for someone who sees me as less than human when they're having a bad day. The rejection stung because it was fair. What if I could prove that today wasn't who I really am? What if I could show you that I'm capable of being better? How? Tariq took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to propose would change everything. Let me hire you not as a gardener, but as a consultant. Help me design a scholarship program for students like yourself, young people who have the ability to succeed but lack the financial resources. Help me understand what kind of support would actually make a difference. Isabella's eyebrows rose slightly, the first crack in her careful composure. You're serious? Completely. I'll pay you the $10,000 I offered earlier, but for work that actually deserves that compensation. And if the program succeeds, if we can help even one student achieve their dreams, then maybe I'll have learned something worth knowing. 6 months later, Tariq stood before the board of directors of the Al-Mansouri Foundation, presenting the first annual report of the Dignity Scholarship Program. The conference room in downtown Los Angeles buzzed with the energy of people who understood they were witnessing something significant, not just another wealthy philanthropist's tax write-off, but a carefully designed initiative that addressed the real barriers facing first-generation college students. The program has awarded full scholarships to 50 students in its first year, Tariq explained, clicking through slides that showed faces and stories rather than just statistics. But more importantly, it has provided mentoring, internship opportunities, and family support services that address the complex challenges these students face. In the audience, Isabella sat with quiet pride, wearing the business attire that had replaced her gardening uniform when she had accepted the position as the Foundation's Director of Student Services. Her insights had shaped every aspect of the program, from the application process that looked beyond test scores to the support systems that helped students navigate the cultural challenges of higher education. The scholarship recipients themselves were a testament to the program's success. Maria Santos, whose parents had immigrated from Guatemala, was studying engineering at UCLA, while her younger siblings received tutoring support that kept the whole family stable. David Kim, whose father's small restaurant had struggled during the pandemic, was pursuing pre-med at USC, while the Foundation's emergency fund ensured his family didn't lose their business. Each story represented not just individual achievement, but family transformation, community investment, generational change. The return on investment, Tariq continued, cannot be measured in traditional financial terms. We're investing in future doctors, teachers, engineers, and entrepreneurs who will strengthen their communities and create opportunities for others. We're proving that talent exists everywhere, but opportunity does not, and that bridging that gap requires more than money. It requires respect, understanding, and genuine partnership. After the presentation, as board members discussed expansion plans and funding strategies, Tariq found himself in conversation with Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the education professor who had helped design the program's academic support components. "You've created something remarkable here," she said, "but what I find most interesting is how the program has changed you. The man who started this foundation 6 months ago was very different from the one presenting today." Tariq considered her observation, thinking about the journey that had brought him to this moment. "I learned that true leadership isn't about making people smaller so you can feel bigger. It's about recognizing the potential in others and creating opportunities for them to realize it." The lesson had cost him more than money. It had required him to examine assumptions about worth and value that he had carried for decades. Working with Isabella and the scholarship recipients had forced him to confront the ways his wealth had insulated him from understanding the struggles that shaped most people's lives. He had learned that dignity wasn't something that could be bought or sold, that respect had to be earned through actions rather than demanded through position. If stories of personal transformation and educational opportunity resonate with you, consider how you might support first-generation college students in your own community. Sometimes the most profound changes begin when we recognize that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their current circumstances. A year after that confrontation in his foyer, Tariq stood in the gardens of his Bel Air mansion, watching Isabella train a new team of gardeners in the specialized techniques required to maintain the exotic plants that had become his passion. She had kept her original position even as her role with the foundation expanded, finding joy in the work that had first brought them together. "The orchids are blooming beautifully this year," he observed, admiring the delicate white flowers that seemed to glow in the afternoon sunlight. "They respond well to consistent care and respect for their needs," Isabella replied, her tone carrying layers of meaning that both of them understood. The garden had become a metaphor for their transformed relationship, a space where mutual respect had allowed something beautiful to flourish. Isabella's expertise was now valued and compensated appropriately, while Tariq had learned to see the artistry in her work rather than just its utility. "I have news," Isabella said, her voice carrying excitement she was trying to contain. "And I've been accepted to UCLA's graduate program in education policy. I want to study how to scale programs like ours, how to create systemic change rather than just individual opportunities." Tariq felt a complex mix of pride and loss. "That's wonderful. When do you start?" "Fall semester, but I'll continue working with the foundation part-time. This work is too important to abandon, and there's still so much to learn." As they walked through the garden together, Tariq reflected on the unexpected education he had received from someone he had initially seen as beneath his notice. Isabella had taught him that character wasn't determined by wealth or position, but by how one treated others when no one was watching, when there was nothing to gain from kindness except the satisfaction of doing right. The Dignity Scholarship Program had grown beyond his wildest expectations, now operating in 4 cities and supporting over 200 students annually. But its true success wasn't measured in numbers. It was visible in the confidence of young people who had been told their dreams were unrealistic, in families who no longer had to choose between education and survival, in communities that were being transformed by the return of educated, committed young leaders. 3 years after Isabella had refused to clean his shoes, Tariq received an invitation that filled him with more pride than any business achievement ever had. Isabella was graduating summa cum laude from UCLA, and she had asked him to attend the ceremony as her guest. Sitting in the audience at Pauley Pavilion, surrounded by families celebrating their children's achievements, he watched as she crossed the stage to receive her diploma. The young woman who had once knelt beside his fountain, tending orchids for minimum wage, was now Dr. Isabella Morales, armed with the knowledge and credentials to change educational policy at the highest levels. Her thesis on innovative scholarship programs had already attracted attention from federal education officials, and she had been offered positions at think tanks and universities across the country. But what moved Tariq most was seeing Isabella's family in the audience, her parents beaming with pride, her younger siblings understanding for the first time that college was possible for them too, her extended family witnessing the transformation that education could bring to an entire community. This was the true return on investment that no financial calculation could capture. After the ceremony, at the reception in Isabella's honor, Tariq found himself in conversation with her father, Miguel, whose construction accident had set in motion the chain of events that brought Isabella to his mansion. "I want to thank you," Miguel said in careful English, his weathered hands gripping a cup of coffee as if it were precious. Not just for the money, but for seeing who my daughter really is, for giving her the chance to become who she was meant to be. The gratitude in the older man's voice was almost overwhelming. Your daughter taught me more than I taught her, Tariq replied. She showed me that true wealth isn't what you accumulate, but what you make possible for others. As the evening wound down, Tariq and Isabella found themselves alone on the university terrace, looking out over the lights of Los Angeles spreading toward the ocean. The city below them pulsed with the dreams and struggles of millions of people, each carrying their own potential for greatness if given the right opportunities. Do you ever think about that day in your foyer? Isabella asked, her voice thoughtful rather than accusatory. Every day, Tariq admitted. It was the moment I realized I had become someone I didn't recognize, someone my daughter wouldn't be proud of. You gave me the chance to find my way back to who I wanted to be, and you gave me the chance to become who I was meant to be. I think that's what real partnership looks like, when both people are transformed by the relationship. The observation captured something essential about their unlikely journey together. What had started as a moment of cruelty and humiliation had become a catalyst for mutual growth and understanding. Isabella had gained not just educational opportunities, but a mentor who understood the value of her insights. Tariq had gained not just a clearer sense of purpose, but a deeper understanding of what it meant to use privilege responsibly. 5 years later, Dr. Isabella Morales stood before a congressional subcommittee on education, testifying about innovative approaches to college accessibility. The Dignity Scholarship model had been adopted by foundations across the country, and federal legislation was being drafted to incorporate its principles into national education policy. In the audience, Tariq watched with quiet satisfaction as Isabella fielded questions from senators and representatives, her expertise evident in every response. She had become exactly what he had hoped when he first offered her that consulting position, a bridge between the world of policy and the reality of lived experience, someone who could translate the struggles of working families into language that decision-makers could understand and act upon. The program they had built together now supported over 1,000 students annually, but more importantly, it had changed the conversation about educational equity. Other wealthy individuals had followed Tariq's example, creating their own programs that prioritized dignity and partnership over charity and condescension. The ripple effects extended far beyond any single scholarship or student, touching communities and families across the country. That evening, at a dinner celebrating the congressional hearing, Isabella raised a toast that captured the essence of their shared journey, to the power of saying no when it matters, and yes when it can change everything, to the understanding that true wealth is measured not in what we accumulate, but in what we make possible for others, and to the recognition that sometimes the most important lessons come from the people we least expect to teach us. As glasses clinked around the table, Tariq reflected on the unexpected path that had brought him to this moment. A single act of cruelty, born from wounded pride and casual prejudice, had become the foundation for a transformation that had touched thousands of lives. Isabella's refusal to clean his shoes had been more than an assertion of dignity. It had been an invitation to become better, to use his resources in service of something greater than his own ego. The marble floors of his Bel Air mansion still gleamed under crystal chandeliers, but the space no longer felt like a fortress of isolation. It had become a gathering place for scholarship recipients and their families, for educators and policymakers, for anyone committed to the belief that talent deserved opportunity, regardless of the circumstances of birth. And in the garden where it all began, the orchids continued to bloom under Isabella's expert care, their delicate beauty a reminder that the most precious things in life required patience, respect, and the understanding that growth was only possible when the conditions were right for flourishing. If you've been moved by this story of dignity, education, and second chances, Consider supporting scholarship programs or mentoring opportunities in your own community. Sometimes the most profound transformations begin when we recognize that everyone deserves to be treated with respect, and that true leadership means creating opportunities for others to realize their full potential. The next time you encounter someone whose current circumstances don't reflect their true capabilities, remember that a moment of recognition and support can change not just their life, but your own understanding of what it means to be truly successful.